Hello, this is Laren with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. I'm going to take a little sneak peek preview at the Journeys Through the Radiant content in the DnD5e rule set. We're using Fantasy Grounds Unity virtual tabletop platform. This is the latest updated version as of 7/19/2022. I'm going to take a look at some of the content, build a character, see how everything looks. So for right now, what I'm going to do is start opening up some of the resources that are part of the module. So if I come over here to the right-hand side and I go to modules and open up this preview window here, which is kind of like your bookshelf or your library, I have most of the DnD5e character creation content, including the Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, Sword Coast Adventures Guide. I also have Monsters of the Multiverse, I have Tasha's, Fizban's, and then finally the Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. There is a player portion. Mostly this is reference material. There's a gazetteer. There's something that explains some of the NPCs, some of the locations, and some of the accreditations that you might look into when you're building your character, so it has more flavor. So most of the character options are for flavor, background, and familiarity with the city or the dwelling itself. Then you actually have the adventure, which is another module, or the adventure part. And this is where we're going to kind of look at some of this. And you do that by looking at the reference manual. So once you've loaded a book, by clicking on activation, and then you will search for whatever book it is. So in this case, I already have it loaded. But if I click on the load filter, it will show me which content I already have loaded. So all these books I have loaded already. The only reason I have all these is because I might want to build a character. Other than that, I wouldn't need all these here. I could probably just get by with the Player's Handbook, Monsters of the Multiverse, and the actual module. I wouldn't necessarily need all this extra stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and close the activation window. And once I've done that, they show up in the library. So if you have an account on the Fantasy Grounds Store or Steam, you need to synchronize your Steam account with Fantasy Grounds Store. You need to be logged in to the actual website. And then through the actual client or the software, you need to be plugged in or signed in through there. And then once you've done that, you can download your purchases depending on what you have. So all I did is went to the store, I purchased it, I was already connected from the website and the actual application. And then once you purchase it, you just hit update and it will pull in the changes and also your purchases at the same time. So those are some things that you'll have to do to enable your content if you go out and buy something through Fantasy Grounds or even Steam. Either way, you have to synchronize your account if you're using Steam, or you have to download your content through the Fantasy Grounds store, depending on where you purchased it. Now, the thing about that is that once you have the content, you need to look through it, kind of get yourself familiar with where everything is. So if you want to look at this as a book and not a modular setup like Fantasy Grounds version, you can click on modules, and then over here on the right, there's a reference manual. So if you click that link, it opens up the actual reference manual for the book. So I'm looking at the reference manual for the adventure, not the player side. So I'll go ahead and close this. And then when you go through and look at all this stuff here on the left, these are like all of the adventures. There's the credits, there's the cover. So this is kind of like having the hardback book if you were going to use it as a library tool. So you could put this on your laptop. You can run this straight from this reference manual. No internet, no nothing. You can just have a laptop with some extra batteries and then have pre-printed character sheets, and then or filled out, and then just use if you use D&D Beyond or whatever you want to use. But in this case, you can use Fantasy Grounds, and then you can use this to keep track of your combat. You can put maps on here, whatever you want to do. But it is kind of convenient to be able to carry just one laptop instead of a bunch of books in a backpack. Although it is nice to have some of the books. I might have like the Player's Handbook at the most and just let the players share that. But other than that, I can run everything out of Fantasy Grounds provided I have a laptop and batteries. I don't need to be connected to the internet, and I don't necessarily have to have people connected through their computers. So this, right off the get-go, one of the things that I liked about the content with the Journey to the Radiant Citadel is the artwork. I'm always kind of happy with most of the artwork that comes from Wizards of the Coast. They usually do a pretty good job with sourcing that out and getting those into their content. Also, you can get an alternate cover, and there's a looks like there's a way that you can scan this and get the alternate cover, and this gives you some more information about this product. There's the way that this is set up. There's some conversion notes that tell you that there's two ways you can run this. You can go through the reference manual, which I'm speaking on now, and the story. So if you go to the right-hand side over here under campaigns and you go to story, you will have similar content that is basically broken down into chapters. So if you want to run this as a module and not as just a reference manual book, you can click on these links here, and then when you go to the arrows, it will take you to the next page, and it will actually get you going through all the different pieces. So this is the same or similar as it is in the actual reference manual. These are a little bit more modular and flexible, so if you use the story entries, you can bookmark these easier, although you can still do that here. So if you wanted to bookmark the conversion notes, you can pop that out, drag and drop it into the hotkeys, and that would give you a shortcut so you can refer back to it so you don't have to keep opening. Or you can do the same thing with the story entry. So this is a handy tool that you would use to keep track of where you're at, or maybe you have to go back and look at something. The other thing about the deviations that were made in this particular conversion was the Radiant Citadel PDF during conversion into Fantasy Grounds module. So the content that they supplied from Wizards of the Coast, it had to be altered and changed. So they changed the maps for the Orchids of the Invisible Mountain from 15 to 14. The original source material skipped 14 for some reason. They created and added a few map elements not included with the adventure in order to have maps for combat. So they had to kind of improvise to make sure that they had the content for virtual tabletop players. But other than that, everything else should be pretty much the same. So as you go through this book, you can use the arrow keys on the bottom, and it allows you to adjust and go through and see what you want to do with it, see what kind of content is in there. You can read through it. They also have a search field on the left, so if you want to look up something, you can. Also, there are ways that you can pop the pages out, as I had showed before, and bookmark them. So you can kind of create your own, kind of like using yellow sticky notes in a book. You know, you can pop the pages out and put them down here on the bottom on the shortcuts so that you can go back to this content or prepare for your next session. So there's some really cool content in here. I don't want to give away too much, but the way this is broken down is by adventure, and it looks like they have it set up in kind of a linear fashion. So the welcome to the Radiant Castle, and the first chapter kind of explains the area and how to kind of use the content. There's a table that you can use to help start off your adventures. There are some tips on using the content, like how do you potentially incorporate it into your games, how to connect the adventures, and then you just have a list of all the adventures down here on the left. You can see that these are all broken down separately, and it looks like they're kind of linear in levels. So you go to level 1. And then you go to level 3 and 4, so on and so forth. So it's kind of laid out methodically in that regard. It may not be perfect, but it's close. But I see a 13th level adventure called Buried Dynasty. If you go to Beyond the Radiant Citadel, there is something that will be coming out. And I think on the DM's Guild, it had just come out recently, so there's some stuff that is available on the DM's Guild that kind of goes beyond the scope of the module, or at least it's still themed and tied into it, but it's not included in this book. I think that's become kind of a status quo type thing where they're actually creating the adventures or the supplements, and then they'll add more later. And I think they've done that recently with this content. I believe I saw an ad or some kind of tweet about this particular type of module that's on the DM's Guild. It's in PDF format. I don't know if it's going to be ported over to Fantasy Grounds or not, but there again, I I'm kind of, I don't know what they're going to do with it, but nonetheless, that there's stuff that's going to be in addition to what's already present. So if you are a big fan of this content, you can almost rest assured you can go to the DMs Guild and find a lot of supplemental and kind of useful content that might go with this content. If you're familiar with Fantasy Grounds, you can input it yourself. You don't have to wait for Fantasy Grounds to have the time to do it. So that's pretty much the majority of what I wanted to cover in regards to the content. Like I said, I don't want to do too many spoilers in case you want to run this or you want to play in it. But I have to say that the artwork is probably my greatest appreciation for it. I am going to open a map and we'll take a look at how the maps look. So let's see. I'll go into one of these adventures. And then I'm in the story entries right now. So what I want to do is go to images, which is still in the campaign area or section. Open that up. And if you notice in most of the data entries for Fantasy Grounds, there's a group. So you can filter this out. So I'll filter this to Journeys through the Radiant Citadel. That way I don't have 50,000 different things. Or you can also do the legacy. You can do it by chapter. So I'm going to go ahead and do... Let's see, I wanted to look for the one that they had mentioned earlier, the Orchids of the Invisible Mountain. This is the one that they said they had to kind of change a little bit. So let's take a look at that. So when we go to the Crystal Caves, let's take a look at that map. I don't want to do too many spoilers, but I do want to check out this map. So here is the Crystal Caves. It's kind of a black and white, kind of Dyson logo type thing. There is a little bit of color on here. Maybe that's because it's made of crystal. I'm not sure. But when you zoom in, yeah, it looks a lot like Dyson logos type of work. And then when you click on this unlock and you go over to the line of sight, you can see that somebody's already meticulously gone through and put in the line of sight. They've put in some of these features here. Not sure, this is like a terrain tool type thing. That might have been something that needed to be a curtain. I'm not sure without reading the adventure. So let's see what this says. So if I go back to play mode, which is the mode you have to be to interact with the map or any player character or NPC tokens, and I click on the link and see what this says. So this is a meditation area. There's some incense in here for a hazard. There's a secret path. Anyone that searches this cavern and succeeds, they discover a segment of stone wall behind the altar that easily shifts aside, revealing a passage to C4. So that must be somewhere, let's see, that's C2. So that must be this area here, which is a secret door. So that's a closed area. So that's a secret door. And then over here, this is a curtain. I'm not sure why they locked it or made this closed, but might have been able to put a curtain there. I'm not sure. It depends on how they interpret the map. But basically, that is already set up. If you want to enable player vision, you can turn this on. You kind of get a preview of what it might look for players, but you also have to have tokens on the map in order to see what's really going on. But nonetheless, the maps are done. Looks like they've already tried to go through. Here's the Ghost Orchid, Tepu, whatever. I don't know how to pronounce it, but this again is another map. And you can see it's already been set up with terrain, line of sight. So you don't have to do this on your own unless you want to go back and change it a little bit. And you're certainly welcome to do that. There's nothing stopping you, other than the fact that you may have a little bit of confusion if you're not familiar with the process, but nonetheless, you're able to adjust. You can add assets. You can even color some of these, so if you wanted to add more colors in here, you could. It's just a matter of how much time you want to put into it. But it looks like most of the maps are black and white, as they had done traditionally. And I imagine if I go to the credits, I'm going to find the Dyson logo credits for that actual content. So if I go to the module and go to this adventure and go to the reference manual, this is the actual book, go to contents and credits, click there, and imagine if I read through here close enough, I'm going to find who actually worked on it. So here's the credits. Let's go to the studio. There's the art. Let's see who's the actual. There's some producers. Here's that. Here's graphics. So I guess I can search for this. I can go to Dyson here. Be a good use for that. Let's see, logo. So you can search through if there's anything in this area that shows up as a keyword search. It'll allow you to search for their names. So I don't see it right off, but I imagine he's the one that built these maps because they look like his work. So I'm not sure. Maybe it is someone else, but nonetheless, you get the idea. They're the black and white. They had a little bit of color to them, but nonetheless, this is one of those things. So I think that they've done a pretty good job with converting it. It's not too bad. It's just basically a collection of adventures. So if you liked Saltmarsh, or you liked the Yawning Portal, or if you appreciated some of the later ones, like we just had the Candlekeep Mysteries was another one. So these are just collections of adventures. Some of them are linear, some are separate. You know, it just depends on which set you get. But basically, it's just another way to add more adventures to your campaigns and such. So this is pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and create a character real quick. That's one of the things that I like to do to check out Fantasy Grounds. I do it whenever there's a major update or anything that changes with Fantasy Grounds. I'll go ahead and make a character just to make sure that's still working. And if it's not working for some reason, I'll report it to the official Fantasy Grounds website, the actual portal for the House of Healing in the forums. I'll send them a copy of my log and maybe a copy of my character if it's a problem with character. And that way they can get on it and they'll fix it. And they're usually pretty good about it. If you give them a decent log and you give them the particulars and you're not using a bunch of extensions and stuff, they'll look at it and they'll tell you whether or not it's a bug or not sometimes, or they'll just fix it and it comes out on the next release cycle or the next update cycle. So you won't get it necessarily that day unless it's something major and it breaks the whole thing. Then they will do a hot fix. But generally, they're pretty good about fixing the stuff. So if I go ahead and click on characters, this is where I can select a character, or I can import, I can export. But in this case, I'm going to build a character with the character wizard, which is on the top left corner. And I'm going to build like a fairy type creature or something for this setting. There really isn't a whole lot of character creation stuff in here, but I'm going to kind of theme the character towards this particular content as best I can. So I'm just going to do a test character. Test PC is just kind of what I've called it for now. I'm just going to leave the standard array. I don't want to mess around with that too much for time's sake. But if you wanted to, you can drop down. You can do a dice roll, manual entry, or a point buy. It just depends on what you're into and how much time you have with your group. Once that's satisfied, you'll see this green check mark. I come over to the race button. I can pick from any of these races as long as I have the content loaded, which I do. I have quite a bit. So I'm going to pick the fairy race, which comes out of the Monsters of the Multiverse, which actually came out of the, I believe it was the one with the carnival. I keep forgetting the name of it, but basically it's, I think it's the Witchlight. That's where those came out of, or the Fae. So you got two methods of creating or building your character. So you can do the 2 points and then 1 point increase, or you can do the Tasha's method, which is increase 3 different abilities by 1. So I'm going to go ahead and do choice 1. That's the standard choice. It's asking me for a language, so I'll go ahead and pick Sylvan, because I think a fairy might know that. And then far as this goes, I'm going to go ahead and add to charisma, which brings that from a 10 or from an 8 up to a 10. And then I'm going to give them some dexterity, so 1 point on dex. So it's 15, 15, 13, 12, 10, and 10. So that's not too bad. But once I've satisfied all the racial requirements, now I'm going to jump over to class. And I have to pick the base class. So I'm going to go with probably a bard. No, it doesn't really have that great of a charisma, so maybe a rogue. So it's pretty strong though for what he is. But I'll go ahead and just leave it that way. I'll just do a rogue of some sort. And now you get some rogue abilities. There's 4 choices. So I'm going to pick acrobatics as 1. I'm going to pick sleight of hand, stealth, and probably one other, maybe perception or deception. Maybe he's a good liar. I'll do that. So now I get 2 expertise skills. So Thieves Tools will be 1, and then Stealth will probably be my other. So those are the things that I'm expert in. Once I've satisfied those class requirements, now I'm going to go to background. So in the background, I can do a charlatan, a criminal, faction agent, entertainer. Maybe an entertainer would be interesting for this character. So I'm going to click entertainer. And with the entertainer background, I'm getting a couple skills automatically. And now I get to pick a tool proficiency. In this case, it's an instrument of some sort. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the pan flute. It's a small flute, kind of makes sense for this build for the small character. Now, what you'll notice here is this class thing's not satisfied anymore. And that's because we probably doubled up on one of the skills. So I need to pick one other skill and one other choice. So I think I'm going to go with acrobatics on the expertise, and I'm going to go with let's go with perception. So now they're no longer doubled up. So that kind of helps you with that, because the old drag and drop method, it would stop you, or it wouldn't stop you, and you wouldn't know you doubled up. When you use the character wizard, it gives you kind of a heads up that, hey, there's something wrong, you need to go back and fix it. So now those are satisfied. If I click on inventory at this point at first level, I will get my starting equipment. So for my class choices, I can get a short bow or a short sword. So I'll go to short sword. And then for, actually, I'll do 2 short swords. And then included is leather, 2 daggers, and thieves tools. The choice number 3 was Dungeoneer's pack, which I can change that if I wanted to. But I want to go with the Burglar's pack, so I want to make sure that I have some tools. And then I get another choice here for whatever it is that I need for equipment. So I did say pan flute, so I want to at least have the flute, even when I have my, some of the things that I'm going to use for this particular character. I notice there's a tripling here of Thieves' Cant. I'm not sure what caused that. I'll have to check that out. That may just be a display fluke. I'm not sure. But now that I have the equipment, I'm going to click on feats, even though I don't qualify for it, and that will satisfy that. Once I'm done, I can click commit, and it will save that character. Now, once you hit commit, that's pretty much a done deal. You're not going to be able to go back and fix it. And it's almost better just to start over at this point. So there's no real good way to edit the character once you hit commit, unless you go in and manually fix everything and change everything. That's the only way you can do it. And it's a real pain. So make sure you look over your character before you hit the commit button. That's a little bit better than the drag and drop, because as you're dragging stuff over, you're committing to it. You can't change it. But at least in the character wizard, you can do everything all the way up to the end and then hit commit instead of committing as you go. So that's a problematic thing that's kind of resolved with the character wizard. So when you come down through here, I'm going to look at my skills. So those are already set. The only thing that wasn't added was Thieves Tools. So if I wanted to do that, I can just add the item manually. I can type Thieves Tools, because technically the Thieves Tools are not really a skill, but they are in a sense. So I'm going to go ahead and make myself proficient, and I'm also expertise. So I made 2 stars, and it's based on dexterity. So I'm really good at picking locks. Figured he's kind of small. That might be something he's good at. And then I will unselect the acrobatics, because I don't want to be expert in that. So that's, go ahead and customize a little bit. And then on your abilities, see, you have Thieves Tools and Thieves' Cants listed here, which is fine. So it's not really an error. It may be a display error in the preview window, but it didn't copy that over onto the character sheet. So that's good. So you have a disguise kit that you're proficient with. If you want to use it, you'll probably have to buy the disguise kit unless you already get it. Maybe if you take the entertainer's kit, you'll get a disguise kit automatically. So I have Common, Sylvan, and Thieves' Cant. There's all my proficiencies. There are my traits, and these are my features. So now when you go to your inventory, if you picked one of the kits or the packs, you have all this stuff in your inventory already, which is all your basic starting equipment plus your treasure. And then you have your notes, which you can add for your background, your alignment, that sort of thing. Go to the log. You can look at that. which is for Adventure League or Organized Play. And then your Actions tab is where all the magic's going to happen. So if I go with 20 or one dag, actually I have 2 daggers, and then I have a short blade, but I actually have 2. But you don't have to have 2 of them listed on here. Then I have an innate spell that comes from being a fairy, which is Druidcraft. And then I have the sneak attack ability, which comes from my class. So that's pretty cool. So all that stuff is pretty much ready to go. And now what if I wanted to, I can go into the action or combat and then display as action. So this is the mode I would be in to be playing. And this is how you would set your character up. And then on the top left corner, you have a portrait. So if you want to go ahead and pick a portrait, you can. So I'm going to go to the included Fantasy Grounds Fantasy portrait. So it says FG Fantasy. So if you single click on that, you wait about 20 seconds, it will pop up with a whole bunch of different portraits that you can use that come with the base program. And this allows you to be able to select those and use them in gameplay. One thing you want to keep in mind is if you export the character, it does not export the artwork. So if you associate, a picture with your character, you're not going to have that same picture. You'll have to reassign it if you import it into a different session. So that's one thing to remember about working with artwork, is normally it doesn't export the artwork. Part of that is because it's protected. So here's a fairy. So I don't have a lot of fairy choices, but I think I like this picture actually. I'll make her a female. So now this is her portrait, and if you don't have a token, the portrait automatically becomes the token. And then when you're on the table, if you're actually playing, if you're not the GM, on the combat tracker, your GM will put your character on there. So if I left click and hold down the left mouse button and drag it over as the GM, it adds the character to this particular combat tracker, and that's how it keeps track of everything, your durations of spells and all kinds of things. The other thing I noticed on here in my Actions tab is I didn't pick any spells because I'm not a wizard, so I don't have to worry about preparing them. However, if you had anything that you only get to use so many times per day, so let's look at Druidcraft. So Druidcraft is one action. It doesn't say anything about a limitation on here. So it looks like you can do this almost continuously, and it's instantaneous, so you can just kind of whip out these little illusions. So that's kind of cool. And then your sneak attack is situational. So if you are going to get in a situation where you're able to use sneak attack, all you'd have to do is click on this button, and that adds the effect. So when you roll damage, let's say you're using your short sword and you've scored a hit, when you actually roll damage in the chat area, it's going to know to automatically add that extra die. So that's really nice. You could essentially just go and you could take a short blade and take the damage and then right click, and it would add the extra dice too. But it's kind of nice to have that effect, especially when you get to higher levels, when you have more than one extra damage dice. So that's just some of the features that you might expect out of some of the characters, depending on what you're building and the combination thereof. So that is just a quick overview of character creation. It's a little better than it was before in regards to time and how long it's going to take you to actually build a character, but it's one of those things that you'll get used to, and you'll work with your game master. If you don't own the content, you'll have to connect to his table and use his actual modules and such to build your characters. So you can just connect with a free account. You don't have to have a license. You can just connect with your game master. He'll go in and you'll log into his table. He'll share the content with you, and then you'll be able to create characters. You can use the character wizard. You don't have a whole lot of control over the rest of the interface. You can select your own portrait, but tokens have to be selected by your game master. So that's something that you want to keep in mind, because they kind of do that to keep the memory load down between the clients and the players. But nonetheless, try to get in on some one-shots. Take a look at the looking for players section on the Fantasy Grounds website in their forums, or you can go to their Discord. They have a place to post for people who are looking for a game or looking for players. There are lots of communities that offer games for Fantasy Grounds. So if that's something you're struggling with, those are two good resources. Now, it doesn't guarantee you're going to get into a game, but it's a good place to start. If you want more help with Fantasy Grounds, you can certainly ask on the forums. You can ask in the official Fantasy Grounds Discord, but you can also come to the Fantasy Grounds Academy. We are a community that helps people use the platform. We also help GMs and content creators and all kinds of stuff. And then at the end of this month, on the 29th through the 31st is our Founders Day weekend. We're celebrating our 5th year. We're going to have some pretty cool activities. Doug Davison's going to stop by on Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon, we're going to have a symposium with the top 3 token creators, or the artists that make all those really cool 3D top-down tokens. And then Sunday, we're going to have an audio symposium. So if any of you are interested in having audio piped into Discord from a source such as Sirenscape, we're going to have Ben Looms from Sirenscape, and then we're going to have 2 community members, Matakire and Gwydion, and they're going to help us go through the process of how to set up audio and have it piped through so you can use it for your sessions. So take care, everyone. You have a good afternoon. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you like the content. If you don't, go ahead and give me a comment. I'll try to get back to you when I can. Thanks for everything, and thanks for your support, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.